On today's show, we look at some NHL preseason standouts. We'll talk about Matvei Michkov, Jackson Blake, Seamus Casey, and a lot more on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakash, QMJHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects, with Sebastian High, USHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the preseason standouts among NHL prospects. We'll start off with the big name here in Matvei Michkov, who's making a big splash in the preseason for Philadelphia. In the first segment, we'll also talk about Jackson Blake and Noah Östlund. In the second segment, we'll focus on some surprises, so Luca Cagnoni, Oliver Kapanen, Nikita Grebenkin. And then in the final segment, we've got a trio of right-handed defensemen to talk about: Seamus Casey, Carter Yakemchuk, and Harrison Brunicke. Before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of our episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get started right away here with Matvei Michkov, who's been incredibly impressive for the Philadelphia Flyers in preseason. The intelligence, the awareness, the goal scoring, the playmaking, everything he does so well is on display, and it's working fairly well against top six competition in the preseason there. So talk me through his game through the preseason and what's made him so impressive.
Well, I mean, I think 6 points in 3 games isn't half bad. But he's been dominant offensively, right? Like he's been playing some fantastic hockey. He scored an overtime winner yesterday at the time of recording, and added to that also, I believe, a goal in regulation and an assist. It was a 3-point night for him against the Boston Bruins, and he also was getting roughed up by Bill Sweezy in one of those sequences that game where Sean Couturier came to his aid to fight him off. So he's definitely getting a warm welcome to the NHL here, but still producing fantastic offense. And the big thing with Matvei Michkov, going back to his draft year, like, yes, the shot is fantastic. He's a fantastic sniper, but it's the intelligence. That is the driver of his offensive game. He's constantly finding soft ice. He's so good 6 feet around the net. He's able to finish plays like few other players that I've scouted in the past couple of years can. And his overall instincts are second to none. So he's a player I believe that Philadelphia fans have obviously embraced with open arms and are going to continue to really champion for the next decade plus, because he's a blue chip prospect in the purest definition of the term. I think that the first line upside here is massive. He's just a fantastic prospect who's been showing why that has been the case, going back to like his D-2, D-3 season, of why he's been being hyped up so much and so many scouts are so high on him. The transition here to NHL preseason has been beyond smooth, and the offensive production with this player is going to be really, really good from his rookie season onwards.
Absolutely. And I think the question of whether or not he makes the opening night roster is just a given at this point. He's very likely going to be I'd say the most likely outcome for him on opening game is probably the second line as a winger on that line. That's probably a realistic expectation to have from Michkov. And yeah, he's setting himself up to have a great season. Let's talk about Jackson Blake as well for a second, the prospect from the Carolina Hurricanes, who I know you're a big fan of. Overall, his preseason so far has been great. He had a fantastic game the other day for Carolina, and yeah, his game has been developing fairly well. He's still a skilled, kind of an elite skill across the board type of player. Great shot, great handling, great passing. But on top of that, it's been the reads, it's been the dynamism, it's been the willingness to will himself into open ice to get those opportunities. The skating's been great as well. But yeah, Jackson Blake's game is one you've followed quite closely over the past couple of years. Talk me through why you liked him so much in his draft year and what's impressed you the most in this preseason.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered most of the bases there already, but for me, it's been always the complexity of not just his reads, but also how he acts on his reads. He finds really creative solutions to the problems he encounters, and
Yeah.
that has also been the case now at the NHL level against preseason competition. He's just constantly looking for interesting ways to beat defenses in ways that aren't really expected, especially for an undersized forward. Like he's 5'11", 172, doesn't have a massive frame to benefit him, but the combination of the brain and the skill and the processing speed and the creativity really drives that offensive upside. And he's a player that I definitely think has really, really good middle six upside and could even entrench a spot on a second line long term in Carolina. And as we mentioned in the past couple episodes, as we were breaking down the top prospect pools league wide, the depth in that Carolina pool is elite. It's fantastic. He
Yes.
did crack our top 5 prospects in the organization, and he's one of my personal favorites. So he's a player that I've always really appreciated, and I'd love to see him crack the NHL full time this season. He obviously graduated from the NCAA last year. He scored 60 points in 40 games for the University of North Dakota in his sophomore year. He only played 2 years there. And also got into one NHL game at the end of the season, playing middle 6 minutes for Carolina. And I could see that keep going this season, especially with how he's been performing throughout preseason. But the final player we wanted to highlight here in our first segment among preseason standouts is a player that both of us have always really loved for the combination of skill, creativity, and elite level intelligence. Noah Östlund.
Absolutely. He's been having a great preseason as well. Has been standing out with his pace of play, his speed, his skill, his intelligence. It's all been on display, and his defensive game has also been pretty good as well. He was a 16th overall pick of the Buffalo Sabres, I believe, in 2022. Yeah, in 2022. And he doesn't have the biggest frame. He's 5'10", $170, I think. And overall does have some filling out to do physically, and his mechanics aren't the best on that side, but everything else, I mean, the playmaking is ridiculous. The hockey sense is ridiculous. He's got great speed, great edge work. He's really, really good in terms of tight quarters handling and playmaking. Really good in situations where he's not really moving his feet at full speed. The only real issue I noticed with Noah Östlund is once he gets going, once he gets to full speed, I feel like he's still kind of overestimating the amount of space he has to work with. Sometimes he hits the blue line in transition with too much speed and kind of skates right at a defender, that kind of thing. But usually, I mean, especially when it comes to lower pace awareness and intelligence, it's there with Noah Östlund. He's really, really good at that. Scored a beautiful toe drag goal against the Ottawa Senators in overtime, and then added 3 assists on Saturday, 3 primary assists, 3 gorgeous primary assists to clarify, for the Sabres as well, in his preseason game on Saturday. He's setting himself up for great success. In my opinion, he's a prospect in the Sabres prospect pool with the most upside. The only issue is there's some limiting factors to his game, and that leads to a bit of uncertainty in his profile moving forward. I don't think he's going to be playing NHL minutes off rip. For me, there's just that physical element's lacking in his game. And what's unfortunate with Buffalo is their top 9 is basically set, right? They don't have space for a prospect to come in. Not even Jiri Kulich or Konsta Helenius. If they come in, they're either the third cog on a third line or a fourth liner. And I don't think that's a great position for Noah Östlund to be in. I think that could be a good position for Jiri Kulich to be in. But I don't think neither of Helenius or Östlund are going to be making the final roster because of the fact that they just have so many vets and pros already ready to go in their top 9 there. But overall, do you think Noah Östlund has a great AHL campaign? And we're talking about a top liner off rip, kind of like we saw with Jiri Kulich in his draft +1?
I could definitely see it. I mean, he thinks the game at that level and then some. And last season he had some nice progression. Like it was his first full-time SHL season where he played more than 11 games. The year before that with Jürgen, he was playing in Hockey Allsvenskan. Within last year, got the call up with Vahwa in the SHL, and he scored 12 goals and 23 points in 38 games, and was a really important piece on that team in a surprisingly good campaign for them. And I definitely think that with Rochester roster, but also with how they've been approaching player development over the past couple seasons, Noah Östlund's going to have all the opportunities to take that team by the horns and lead them in the same way that Yuri Kulik has the past couple seasons. And whether both of them are going to be in Rochester or just one of them remains to be seen, obviously. But I think either way, Östlund's going to be an important first-line piece in Rochester, get a lot of reps on both sides of the puck, and will definitely be able to try to translate his skill and cerebral approach to the game to the North American ice surface.
Absolutely. But that's our first segment done. We'll get into our second segment where we look at some surprises, some surprise prospects who made a splash in preseason and earned themselves a continued stay. We'll look at Luca Cagnoni, Oliver Kapanen, and Nikita Grebenkin in just a sec. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors at Game Time. If you're looking to buy cheap tickets last minute to any event, Game Time is the best place to secure them. Game Time is safe, secure, and incredibly easy to use, and they're obsessed with saving you money. They've got a bunch of deals to help you save, from flash deals to zone deals to last-minute deals, all to make sure you get the best price for your tickets. And the Game Time guarantee makes sure you get the best price for your tickets as well. If you find a ticket in the same section and row for less than what Game Time has to offer you on a different website, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. They also have all-in pricing now, which you can toggle in the app in order to see the exact price of your ticket after fees, after taxes, to make sure you make the best decision for your wallet. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, super simple. Just create an account and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. So download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment here, we'll be talking about some surprises of preseason here. We'll start off with Luca Cagnoni for the San Jose Sharks, who was a 5th-round pick in the 2023 NHL draft. Did I call it or did I not call it? I had him 17th overall in his draft year, and I was certain that Cagnoni would develop into what he's shown so far for the San Jose Sharks. He's been kind of pegged in as an offensive defenseman, an undersized offensive defenseman. I believe he's 5'10". On defense,
officially listed at 5'9" and 183 currently.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, so yeah, definitely undersized as a defenseman. But man, it's not just the offense. The defense has been truly great with Luca Cagnoni. The decision-making off the rush, the ability to suppress play below his own goal line, the ability to just circumvent his lack of size with really smart reads, really great stick work, and a decent amount of physical tools as well. Cagnoni has been very, very impressive. He's been logging big minutes for San Jose and has been very impressive throughout this preseason overall. I don't think he's going to make the opening night roster, but he's going to be a great option moving forward for San Jose as they continue their development. I think San Jose's issue is still D depth, even though they have, again, probably the best prospect pool that we've ever seen. Outside of Sam Dickinson, you might throw Matthias Havelin and Shakira McCall-Madula in a tier below that, but they needed someone to step up, and Cagnoni has been that guy so far on defense in their prospect pool. What do you think of me being so bullish on him and it working out, though? I just want to hear your thoughts on that. Just want to boast a bit.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like you were championing Cagnoni for that entire 2023 draft class, going back all the way to like October, November, December. I remember he really like beating his drum there, and he's a very easy player to fall in love with, especially like from the public scouting perspective, where we don't put quite as much weight behind size and physicality. If there's a lot of really good compensatory tools in the toolkit, and I mean, that is exactly what Cagnoni is. He compensates so well for that lack of size. He's a fantastic skater, great edge work, really good in transition, really good at defending the rush, really good in breakouts, really good at most things. And the offensive zone, like facilitating and creation, is also really good. The passing, just the overall passing combinations that he can play in are very advanced, and overall a highly intelligent, gifted, toolsy player that should not have dropped outside the top. Like, in your eyes, maybe the top 20. In my eyes, maybe the top 32 of that draft. But he was a clear first rounder, and he fell to the 4th round at 123, which was fantastic value for the San Jose Sharks. And that's definitely a bit of a victory lap that you're more than deserving to run after being by far the loudest champion of him in his draft year.
I don't think anyone had him as high as me. So I'm glad he's working out so far. We'll see what he becomes in the NHL, but a lot of promise in Cagnoni's profile. We'll also talk about Oliver Kapanen here for the Montreal Canadiens, who As we mentioned in our last episode, where we kind of reviewed the Canadiens prospect pool for our prospect pool rankings, was irreproachable in preseason. Every decision he made, every single read he made was just on point and a very NHL thing. He's been very, very impressive so far for the Canadiens in preseason. Did not play their last game on Saturday, where they got basically bullied by the Toronto Maple Leafs the entire game, and I think it's best for him that he didn't play in that role. He's already set. I mean, there's already a move lined up to loan him out to Finland again.
To Sweden.
To Sweden rather, for his final year. But that might change with Patrick Laine probably being out for the entire season, given the gravity of that injury. There's a spot for the taking there with Kapanen, right?
There absolutely is, and I think there was one regardless without that line A injury as well, because he's been really pushing for a bottom six center spot with Montreal, and he really is a natural center. Like he's the definition of a natural centerman, with like the defensive responsibility, his off puck routes, his ability to not just find and access space for himself, but create that space for his line mates as well. He's a real line elevator, and everything in his game, ranging from his frame to his goal scoring threat to his like off puck like dynamism, I'd almost call it, because he's constantly creating when he doesn't have the puck on his stick, which is also probably the best thing you can do to build your case in a Martin St. Louis team. But so much to like in his game, and as you mentioned, especially now with another top six forward falling down to injury, I think the door is definitely open, and with his performances so far, he's been one of the best six forwards in preseason for Montreal, without much doubt, in my opinion, and definitely is going to threaten to crack the lineup full time, and I really think he should. Whether he's playing on a third line or fourth line to start the season remains to be seen, obviously, but regardless, I think he's a player that Montreal is better with than without.
Yeah, so money on the line. If you were a betting man, does Oliver Kapanen start the season in Montreal?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Pretty confidently. Pretty confidently. Like 70-30.
Fantastic. We love to hear that. Let's close things off here with Nikita Grebenkin, who's been very impressive for the Toronto Maple Leafs as well in their preseason tournament so far. Let's talk about his game, because he's got he's got a great frame, first and foremost. I think that's very clear when you watch him on the ice. He's a decent skater as well. He can carry pucks across lanes. He can kind of push defenses back with net drives and all that good stuff. But the finesse in his game has been pretty decent to watch as well, right?
Absolutely, and he's an absolute like locomotive on the ice. Like the first Habs versus Leafs prospect game, the first game back at the Bell Center for the season, I was sitting second row, just like a couple seats off from the Habs bench, and Grebenkin was playing left wing that game. So whenever they were on, Toronto was shooting on the end of the ice where I was sitting, you always just saw Grebenkin zooming right by the pane of glass, and the speed he's able to generate, the power he has in stride is really impressive. And as you mentioned, the skill is really solid. I thought that the defensive work rate was better than expected from what I saw in his KHL tape with Magnitogorsk last season, which I saw in passing a couple times. And yeah, he's a wrecking ball out there. And with that goal scoring touch, with that finesse, definitely a player I think deserves to be in contention for the final Maple Leafs roster for this season. If he ends up being sent down to the Marlies, that's like your main call up. If you lose a top 9 player and you want to replace a level of skill and physicality in your lineup, you're bringing him back up. So he's a really good find for Toronto, and had a great season last year as well. So shouldn't be too shocking that he's impressing now in preseason after scoring 19 goals and 41 points in 67 KHL games last season as a 20-year-old. But definitely a player who's still progressing in his development, but already has the frame and the style of an NHL caliber player at this point.
For sure. I think the surprise is mainly because people expected, Easton Cowan, Fraser Minton, those guys to really stand out and take control of the team and kind of be the main. I mean, they still are. Let's not fool ourselves. Like
Minton hasn't had a real shot at that after being injured in that second Habs Leafs prospects game.
That's the only issue there. I think people expected him and Cowan to be the guys really leading the charge for an NHL spot, but Grebenkin's right on Cowan's heels right now in terms of getting an NHL spot. There's a definite chance he starts the season in Toronto, and if he doesn't, he's going to be in the rotation of call-ups for sure. Probably going to be a top liner in the AHL and kind of earn a cup of coffee or two over the season until he can kind of cement himself as an NHL option long term. I think he's got a shot at that, and he has a style of play that can fit as a complementary guy on the second line if a big name gets injured. He's also got the style to play in the bottom six, to be a checker. He's a very versatile player, and that's exactly what Toronto needed, especially with their cap situation. But that's our second segment done. We'll get into our third segment here, where we talk about a trio of right-handed defensemen prospects who have been really standing out in the preseason. We'll talk about Seamus Casey, Carter Yakemchuk, and Harrison Brunicke in just a sec. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
Hey NFL fans, you can start this season big with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you place your bets. Whether you want to take your swings on American football or European football, with the Champions League now getting going with the first match day now in the rear view, and all the big leagues also really ramping up at this stage, or maybe you're not a football fan in any capacity and prefer tennis or golf, FanDuel has something for everyone. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com.
All right, so let's close things off here on these preseason standouts in the NHL among prospects by talking about a trio of right-handed defensemen who have been really, really good, standing out massively for their teams and pushing for NHL spots. The first, I think, is the most likely of the three in terms of making the NHL off rip and kind of starting the season on the roster, and it's Seamus Casey from the New Jersey Devils. He has been phenomenal. Seamus Casey, if you don't know, is an undersized right-handed defenseman who was playing with the University of Michigan this past season as their top power play quarterback, put up a bunch of points, was kind of neck and neck with Lane Hudson in terms of these undersized Ds from the NTDP who went to the NCAA and just started popping off. And the expectation of the season was that Casey was going to be playing the AHL, kind of working his way up gradually on that side, but Casey's made a legitimate push to start the season in the top six core of defensemen for the New Jersey Devils. His game overall has been impressive. He's not just he used to be a very, very clearly offensive defenseman. That's really what he did, what he excelled at, and what he pushed himself to continue to progress in. But watching him this preseason, he's been great defensively. He's been doing really good on the defensive side. Great reads, physical as well. He's been throwing his weight around, really smart on breakouts, really smart on zone entries. There's just so much to work with there with Casey overall. And that's what's impressed me the most and what surprised me the most in his progression is I expect Casey to be a long-term project, a guy who hits the NHL at 22, 23, 24, and then just kind of slowly but surely develops into a high-end offensive defenseman. But Casey's been great on both sides of the ice, right?
He already has, exactly. And I think, as you mentioned, a lot of that just comes down to how intelligent he is. Like, he's not the biggest player at 5'10", 181, but he has so many compensatory tools to really like elevate his game and adapt to situations where size is very advantageous, especially against professional competition. And especially with the puck on his stick, there are few more exciting or dynamic defensive prospects out there today than Seamus Casey. He's a fantastic puck handler, so creative offensively, great playmaker, constantly activating in the offensive zone. There's so much to like in his game. And another defensive prospect who really likes to activate offensively and has definitely shown his abilities in this preseason against the Toronto Maple Leafs is Carter Yakemchuk of the Ottawa Senators. The recent 7th overall draft selection in the 2024 class has gotten off to a very good start in preseason. The first game that he did play there against the Leafs was particularly great. He scored the OT winner going end to end and made Mitch Marner look a little bit foolish on that sequence. And the highs with the Yakemchuk are always going to be stratospheric. The second game, I think, showed a little bit of the flip side of when things aren't going incredibly in his game, things can fall apart a little bit. And this is also the immaturity that still is in his game. He's still quite a raw player that I don't think should be playing NHL minutes this season. I don't think that would be the best thing for his development. I'd love to see him just go back to the Calgary Hitmen in the dub and be given the reins and also perhaps given some opportunity playing penalty kill a bit more and really refining his defensive reads. I think that's probably the crux of what needs a decent amount of work still in his game. But the highs, even against NHL competition, have been very, very impressive so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree. Yakemchuk will always be your end-to-end guy. He's always going to be the guy who's going to put up highlight reel goals and make everyone look
Yes.
foolish when he gets the puck. The issue with
He'll be
Yakemchuk,
on highlights in every sense of the word, both
yeah,
in the ones that he creates and the ones that are created against him.
yeah, exactly, and that's the thing. His reads, his improvement on that side, on both sides of the ice, there's some growth left on that side. But I think he still showed that he's able to play inside structure. He's able to kind of follow the game plan pretty well, and position himself well, work inside of that structure in order to be a cog in it rather than be the guy who breaks structures on every play, both in the positive and the negative sense. So impressive from Carter Yakemchuk so far for sure. But let's talk about another right-handed defenseman who impressed for the Pittsburgh Penguins, Harrison Brunicke. I'm so happy to be mentioning his name in this list as well, because I'm getting Luca Cagnoni vibes here. I was the biggest champion of him at the Dauber Prospects team, and
Not even close.
really made a big push for him to stay in the first round. Did he end up staying in the first round? I think it might have been our 31st or 32nd pick in our first round of Dauber.
I may have sabotaged your attempt to get him in the first, or if not, I think I attempted to.
Yeah.
Either way, he was between 30 and 34. He was either one of the last players in our first or one of the first in our second round.
Exactly, yeah. But Brunicke has been very impressive for Pittsburgh so far. Has been showcasing his two-way game, his ability to defend the rush, to skate incredibly well, because that's always been his kind of biggest strength. But as we've pretty much mentioned the entire past year in his draft year, anytime we talked about Brunicke on this podcast, the hands are ridiculous as well for a guy who's mainly listed as a defensive or physical defenseman. He's got great hands, he's able to move up the ice. He's got a great two-way game, great vision, great playmaking, and all that was on full display there for Pittsburgh. He's been very, very impressive for them. As a 6'2" defenseman with decent offensive skill and the foundation of defensive skills to make the game work for him, that's a great combination. The only real issue is kind of the same as Yakemchuk's, which is reads. It's just that I think that Brunicke's offensive ceiling is way lower, whereas his defensive ceiling is way higher. The reads in terms of his defensive game aren't that bad and aren't as bad as Yakemchuk's. In terms of offensive reads, that's the main issue. Brunicke is still a bit erratic or neurotic offensively, can make reads and make decisions with the puck that lead to turnovers instead of leading to decent offensive chances. But overall, he really showed how it can all come together inside of structure with Pittsburgh. Was very, very impressive for them. I liked every single game I watched of his, so very happy with his performance. Any final words before we close things off here, Sebastian?
Yeah, I sabotaged you a lot on that front last year.
Oh,
He
did
ended
you?
up 36th on our board, which I don't think was where you would have ended up on him. With the players ahead of him being Linus Eriksson, Aaron Kiviharju, Charlie Ellick, Ryder Ritchie, Miguel Marquez, and Cole Baudouin going up to third.
Marquez ahead of Brunicke hurts me a decent amount.
Me too. I was never the biggest Marquez fan. That said, the number 29 guy also perhaps a bit iffy in light of the preseason now. Jett Luchanko was our 29th ranked prospect, which was low, I think, and could have been a bit higher, at least above Adam Jiricek, who was 2 spots above him.
And could have been a subject
of Terry Parasak over Jett Luchanko.
That's a problem. But yeah, Jett Luchanko also could have been as a subject of this episode. Let's talk about him for
Absolutely.
a second.
Yeah, let's do it. He's been fantastic.
He's been amazing. NHL reads, NHL decisions, NHL skating. He's got basically everything sorted to start the season on Philadelphia's roster and might actually make it. Our head scout at Elite Prospect, David St. Louis, had made that prediction earlier on in the season. And it's been pretty good, right?
Torts loves him. Torts adores him. If he gets sent back to junior, it's not Tortorella's decision. I think Torts would love to keep him around in the bottom 6. And I mean, very strong like Zach Benson like training camp vibes from last season in terms of how he's grabbed his foothold at the NHL level. Just outworking everybody and making smart plays, quick plays, not holding on to possession too long, not trying to do flashy, fancy things that he could get away with in junior, just playing effective, linear, high-paced hockey. And that's what he does very well. And look, I still think 13th overall was perhaps a teensy bit rich, but in terms of the fit in what Philadelphia values and what their fans want to see in intensity and intelligence and also development trajectory. Like the amount that he's improved in the last year has been huge, and he's also very young for the draft class. There's a lot of reasons to argue to have picked him as high as they did, and we'll see how things keep developing over the next couple seasons here. But I definitely think that this is a player that Philadelphia Flyers fans are going to be very, very happy is on their team rather than playing against them, starting now, basically.
Absolutely. So I'll ask you again, money on the line. Does Luchanko start the season in Philadelphia?
That one's tougher. That one's tougher than the Kapanen one. I would say it's close to a 50-50. You know, make it fun. Just say yes. Yeah, he makes the team. I want him to. I want more reasons to be excited to watch Philadelphia. I mean, Matvei Michkov is a really big one this year already, believe me. But the combination of him and Luchanko, who I also think are two very complementary players if you play them on the same line, like that would be a lot of fun. I would definitely be tuning into Flyers games more regularly than last season in that case. But if he gets sent back to junior, I also would quite like that for his development, because he'd be given a chance to just light up the OHL in a similar way that Easton Cowan did as a D+1, and returning to a team where he perhaps wasn't like an elite offensive producer in his draft year, but going back as a young player from his draft class, just enamored by being picked higher than expected to go, and a really, really strong training camp where he almost cracked the opening night roster, and just going back with a vengeance and lighting up the OHL. And I mean, I'm sure Guelph Storm fans really want that to happen, but whatever I think occurs. The nice thing with having drafted a player like Jett Luchanko is that I don't think there are many ways to mess up his development. Whether you send him back to junior to refine the offensive side of his game, whether you keep him in the NHL to try to lift his entire toolkit up to NHL pace from the get-go, he's smart enough, pacey enough, skilled enough, and I mean, fast enough. He's a fantastic skater to adapt to that relatively quickly. And the defensive responsibility is going to really ease that transition too if he makes the team on opening night. But I'm going to reverse Una the question back onto you. For both Oliver Kapanen and Jett Luchanko, are they making the teams?
Yes. That wraps things up for today's episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review, and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our future shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of October. It's been Hattie Kalakash with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.